right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Shorts 360. Woo! Rob, beautiful day.
What's going on?
There you go.
Thirsty Thursday.
Anybody want one of these cups? I think we only have two of them, but we can probably get more.
We'll auction them off. I don't know, though. With the tariffs, you never know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Well, we just got back from Medicare, so we weren't here for... it feels like a week, and then the month before that, I think all we talked about was this event, Medicarians, all the cool stuff there, and it ended up being a huge event, right? I think they said they had 4,000 agents there.
Yeah, I keep hearing it's one of the largest events that anyone's been to.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was as busy. I don't think we ate lunch the entire day.
Now that would bother me.
The whole week, yeah. It was just you showed up, there was 1 million people there, you worked, and then all of a sudden it was 5 o'clock and you were running to dinner somewhere or whatever you were doing. It was pretty fun, though.
Well, at least the weather had to be pretty good, right? It wasn't
it was
smoldering.
It was fine. It was fine. Yeah, it wasn't that bad. But first episode back. Really interesting topic. I've been talking about doing this topic, I feel like, for a year now, and it's really important. So myself, I spoke at the NABIP event in Connecticut almost a year ago right now, and at that event, I met Bill Hepscher from Canadian Medstore, and the two of us got hooked up, and we did the presentation sort of back to back, and the two of us were like, all right, we'll just kind of, both kind of wing it together, and we bounced off each other. And afterwards, it got really rave reviews. It went over really well. It was all the final rules stuff came out, and all the prescription drug stuff was going up in the air, and it really went well. And so Bill and I talked about doing the podcast together a year ago, and I saw him at Medicarians, and he's like, he's like, what the hell's going on? We haven't done this podcast yet. So with us today, we've got Bill from Canadian Medstore. So Bill, thank you so much for the patience. It's only been maybe 10 months, maybe a year. Maybe a year is too long, but thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Bob. I will say it certainly wasn't your fault. I think when we first met, if you remember, that was the beginning of the conference season for all the local NABIP chapters. And then we were right into, the kickoff events, which we participated, obviously, in all your stadium events last year. And we just kept talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. It didn't happen. One thing I do want to make sure your audience knows, though, only because I was there at Medicarians too, and I know you were saying you didn't eat lunch the whole time, but I kept seeing you at the bar right around noon, 1 o'clock. So maybe
I was getting drinks for other people. There were so many agents; they look thirsty all the time.
Liquids don't count.
Yeah,
it's Vegas.
Liquid calories.
I'm just saying, in Vegas, it's a different time thing. You guys are East Coast guys. You're over there on the West Coast. I get it. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah, it was interesting. I felt like even till the last day, I was waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, staring at the ceiling because the time zone just didn't match quite right. But
it takes a while.
Yeah.
I feel like it takes days, even weeks sometimes, to really adjust.
Yeah.
And by the time you adjust, you're coming back.
Exactly.
And then you're up at 11 staring like, oh, man, I should be asleep right now.
Yeah, I find my first few days out on the West Coast, I can always get a lot of stuff done because I feel like I'm up in the morning before my office is up yet. But after 2 or 3 days in Vegas, you start to it starts to change a little bit.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. So over the past year, great point. There's been so many events, so many different meetings. I know we've run into each other a bunch of times. You were good enough. You participated in all of our events. We did the championship series, which we don't have a drum roll yet, but that is going to be happening here shortly. We're nailing down some details on that. But last year we did a couple of the big stadiums like MetLife Stadium and Nissan Stadium where the Tennessee Titans play, and so we did a couple of those events. But one thing hasn't changed. I think the need and the conversation around prescription drugs, the high cost around prescription drugs, I feel like that's been going on forever. I don't know that there's ever been a great solution, and now there's been a ton of changes. When the IRA hit, and I don't say the Inflation Reduction Act. I use air quotes every time I say it. The Inflation Reduction Act took place. That made a big change on what was going on in the prescription drug world. You guys, especially, doing what you do, it had to be, wow, this is a complete shift in the market, right?
Oh, it was just like it was for agents. It was a crazy year. It was a nutty year. But like most agents I talked to who didn't mind, putting their, getting their head down and doing the work, it was the best year we ever had. Craziest year, but definitely the best year we ever had. And when I talk to successful agents, again, who don't mind going to work every day, they will tell you the same thing, that it was, if you're positioning yourself as a resource to your client, this was a perfect year to not only maintain your book of business, but to massively grow your book of business. And that's what we saw in our own business, and that's what we saw with the successful agents that utilize our service to help their clients. So
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, absolutely. And just a little background. I mean, I think it's important. I think a lot of people have heard, hey, drugs from Canada, but the Canadian Medstore, I mean, you guys have been around for a long time. I mean, 2003, I want to say, right?
23 years we've been around
Yeah.
now. So,
And it's U.S. based. You guys are down in what, Florida, right? The free state of Florida, as I like to say.
Free state of Florida, baby. Yeah, we've been here 23 years. We opened our first location, our first office in Zephyr Hills, Florida, which is right outside of Tampa. And now we operate 7 storefronts throughout the state of Florida, but we service clients in all 50 states. So, yeah.
And it's technically the clients working with you as their pharmacy on prescriptions, right? I mean,
kind of. So yeah, if you don't mind, I'll give you a real quick story, the real quick background, because I don't come from the world that you guys come from. I didn't come from an insurance background. I always joke that when I was 20 something, when I started the company, the only thing I knew about health insurance is I had an insurance card in my pocket. And the only reason I did that is because my dad hammered into my head that I needed to have health insurance. And I used to complain, think about this, Bob, I used to complain about my $96 a month premium and think, man, you know how much beer I could buy with $96? But that was how it started. But my brother was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and went through a bone marrow transplant. And even I can tell you, 25 years ago, that bone marrow transplant, the anti-rejection medication he needed was going to cost tens of thousands of dollars. And at the time, we were hearing stories about folks that were driving to Canada to buy insulin for their diabetic children, or, COPD medication or heart medication for their elderly parents. So I said, well, heck, maybe we can look into this for my brother. And sure enough, we found that the exact same medication that my brother was taking here in the United States that was costing us tens of thousands of dollars, we were able to get from a Canadian pharmacy for just a few $100. So I came back to Tampa. I spoke to a physician friend of mine. Now, again, this is for the old people on the podcast. This was prior to Medicare Part D being law. So at this time, there was no prescription drug coverage in Medicare Part D. So we opened a store, what we called it a store in Florida. We didn't hold any medications, but seniors could walk into our office and we could help them order a drug from a licensed pharmacy in Canada, have it mailed to them right here in Florida. And that's how our company started, because of my brother's situation, speaking to my physician friend, recognizing that if you lived in Maine or Michigan or Vermont, you could drive 10 minutes away to a Canadian pharmacy and be sitting back on your couch. But if you lived in, Philadelphia even, or if you lived in Tampa where I lived, you didn't have that geographic convenience to just hop in your car and drive over to Canada. So we created a program where people could order from licensed pharmacies in Canada and have those medications mailed to them here in the U.S. So talk about changes. We've been through the changes, because 18 months after we opened our company, Medicare Part D became law. And people said, hey, the phone was ringing, but it was people telling us, thanks for helping us for the last 18 months, but we don't need Canada anymore. We've got this great thing called Medicare Part D, and we're never going to have to pay more than $25 for a drug now. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, about 4 months later, when people were hitting the donut hole back then, they were calling us back and saying, hey, that drug that used to cost me $100 is now $300 or $400. Can I go back to Canada? And that's really where we grew, Bob. That's when we started recognizing we knew nothing about insurance. We knew nothing about Medicare, started working very, very closely with primary care doctors and licensed health insurance agents that were assisting people through the Wild West days of Part D. And that's where we built our relationships and recognized that our best network is doctors and licensed health insurance agents, because those are the ones that are sitting down over the kitchen table with, Mr. and Mrs. Smith in Zephyr Hills, Florida, and helping them pick the right Part D plan. And that's how we positioned ourselves. And that's really where our massive growth came from. So,
yeah, I mean, great story. I mean, and it resonates with so many people. I mean, listen, we all have family members that have had those prescriptions that are just exorbitant in the way that they cost. And talking a little bit about what's going on in the Medicare world, specifically, you had the Inflation Reduction Act come out, and then you had the carriers and the way that the costs were being shifted around, who's paying for what. We knew the formularies were going to change, right? We knew the costs were going to change. Now we got a little bit of a stay. I mean, if you remember, we talked about this in other episodes, but the Part D stabilization demonstration program, which is a mouthful. I come up with it. I mean, the government. I guess what happened, Bill, is that somebody in the government was like, "Oh, this sounds like a great idea," and then they saw all the cost increases for Part D bids coming in from the companies, and it was an election year, and they said, "Well, maybe it's not a great idea to triple the cost of prescription drugs for all the seniors right before the election."
Well, Bob, I think you hit right on it. When it was right before the election, somebody said, maybe this isn't such a great idea. And if you notice, you would have expected to see a lot of pushback from the other side typically, but neither side wanted to be seen as the one who was causing the problem. So everybody just kind of said, oh, yeah, let's just fix this. I think it's interesting that no one's really even justified where that funding came from, because when the IRA was passed, it was, this is the way we were going to pay for it. And all of a sudden, all this extra money started to have to come from somewhere, and they found it, but I think you're right. As we go into the next couple of years, you're going to have to see some of those, what I would say the freebie giveaways are going to have to be kind of drawn back. It's going to be interesting to see how they do that politically, though, because nobody wants to be the one that causes the increase in premiums. So.
Yeah, I think as the people in Doge found out, a lot of that money wasn't technically categorized as anything. They should have just said we're going to pay this money to some things, but
we had a lot of people over 150 years old collecting Social Security.
Well, this is true. This is true.
Oldest people living. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, but because of, we still saw a ton of formulary changes. We're still seeing a lot of that going on. So. Talking a little bit about specifics. When we see Medicare agents working with your team, right? Even some of the high cost drugs like an Eliquis, right?
That's like the number one. I feel like we run into that because there's no generic.
Yeah, so you're still seeing high costs when it comes to these prescription drugs, and especially with the changes that are going on. So walk me through a day of, an agent's got a client, they're sitting across from them, and then let's just use Eliquis. Hey, you're on Eliquis. What's the process that you see best practice for an agent?
Yeah. So a couple of quick things. Eliquis is the perfect example because it's the drug that we talk about all the time that folks call, every single day, especially agents. If you work in Medicare for more than 3 days, you've come across Eliquis. It's one of the ones, and it's one of the troublemakers is what we call it. So what we found is back in the old days, prior to IRA and even, a little bit ACA started to close that donut hole a little bit. Somebody would order a drug from Canada because they wanted to avoid getting themselves into the donut hole. So what we typically would say is, hey, you're taking these 5 drugs. The one expensive drug is Eliquis. Your other 4 are generics. Order your Eliquis from Canada, and then you won't have to worry about the donut hole, and you'll have that room if you need something more expensive down the road. Or somebody would be in the donut hole, call Bob and say, hey, we picked that plan. It seemed to work, but now I'm in the donut hole. I can't afford my Eliquis anymore. Canada was an option for them until the year started back over. The IRA changed all that because when we had folks that were taking more than one brand name drug back in the old days, Canada was a great way to help them save money. The IRA with the $2,000 max, we actually said we fired a lot of clients. We told them, listen, we understand you've been ordering from us for 5 years, but because you're taking 2 or 3 brand name expensive drugs, you want to get to that $2,000 max as quickly as you can. So don't order it from Canada anymore. But the reason our business grew so much is because the typical person that you run into on a daily basis isn't taking 3 or 4 brand name drugs. They're typically taking Eliquis and 3 or 4 generic drugs. So when people were looking at picking Part D plans, the savvy agent said, instead of having to put you in this $70 a month premium that you're going to have a $595 deductible anyway, plus a copayment to get your Eliquis covered. Then when you finally get to 2000, it'll come out. But guess what? You're probably not going to get there until way, way late in the year. What we could do is we can pull out the Eliquis. We can order it from the Canadian Medstore, because guess what? The Eliquis cost from the international pharmacy is $50 a month, $50 a month as opposed to $650 here in the United States. Now what an agent has done is they said, we don't need to buy the $90 or $70 a month premium plan. We can keep you in the inexpensive plan that covers all your generic drugs for free. We can order your Eliquis from Canada, which we know is going to be a total out of pocket for the whole year of $600. And now you save that person literally a few $1,000s that year, because they're not paying the high premium. They were going to have to hit their deductible before the Eliquis was covered. And when it was finally covered, they were still going to have probably anywhere from, what we've seen is anywhere from a $47 copayment, probably up to like that $65, $70 copayment range anyway. So they're actually getting the medication through the international pharmacy for less than what it would have cost them on their premium. So that was a perfect example of a very, very easy way for an agent to do the right thing for their client. And by the way, you and I have talked about this a lot, Bob. The agent walking in before your agent and the agent walking in after them are all selling the same plans. What differentiates you as an agent from those other folks? It's service. It's providing, alternative sources like ours that other people aren't bringing to the table. And the feedback we get from your guys that we're working with is, man, I actually get so many more referrals, because guess what? If they're taking Eliquis, their buddy's taking Eliquis, or they're taking Xarelto, or they're taking Januvia, or they're taking one of those, problem drugs that we talk about. And that's how we step in and help folks out.
It's really, just goes a long way for an agent to give that value add, right? That extra up and above what other agents are going to do for them, and it really just cements them in the house. If you're offering them these type of savings, I mean, that's huge. And what I love about the Canadian Medstore is they've got people working there. The agents can call up and say, like, all right, they're on this high cost drug. What can you do for me? It's better. It's not better. I mean, do you have that conversation? You know whether or not you can help the person with this or not.
Right. And so, Bob, you hit right on it. And because of some of your feedback and from a lot of folks that, work with you guys, we got the feedback that, listen, I've worked really, really hard to build my book of business. I don't want to just, people know about Canada, but we don't want to just send them to a website somewhere. That's what I'm currently doing. So what we did at the Canadian Medstore, remember, we're a US based company. We're based out of Tampa, Florida. We're doing kind of like what your agents do for their clients, help them pick the best plan for them. So what we do is we help them work with the best pharmacies internationally. This one's going to get you best price. This one's got a generic for a little bit less expensive if you want it. We don't order just from Canada now. We can order from Australia, New Zealand, the UK, all other tier 1 countries, but also offer sometimes drugs for less expensive. But the main thing we did to differentiate ourselves from the online companies is we've created what we call a concierge team. So when your agent comes on and starts working with us, they're going to be assigned a concierge. And what that means is that concierge is that agent's go-to person. So when they refer a client, they're not just saying, hey, here's the website I want you to go to and figure it out on your own. They're going to make the introduction to Amber or Corey or Pam, one of the agents that work in one of our offices in Florida. When I say agents, meaning, our representatives. And that'll be the concierge for that client, for that agent, for whoever it happens to be. So if they want to call and just say, hey, I ran across this drug that I've never heard of before and it's really expensive, is this something we can get? That's the reason they're there. But the main reason they're there is when that client recognizes that Eliquis is going to be the right thing for them through the Canadian Medstore, the agent can hand them off to our concierge, and our concierge will handhold them through the process. And agents love that because they've worked so hard to build their business. They want to know that they're handing it off to somebody who's going to do the right job. And we talk about, again, cementing that relationship. When you have somebody in the business that can help and you're making that handoff, it works really, really well for agents. So
that's huge. And talking about the agents out there, our agents, a lot of them are Medicare centric, right?
Oh yeah.
But they definitely do other product lines. So I'm sure you're seeing a lot for Medicare, but are you talking to those agents that are working in the ACA market, doing group insurance? I mean, is this a fit across the board? This isn't just Medicare, right?
Not anybody can utilize Canada. Remember, you use Canadian Medstore. Basically, when we started back in the old days, it was folks again who didn't have prescription drug coverage. They were on Medicare, but it doesn't matter. We can serve anybody. Probably the largest growth we've seen outside of Medicare has been in the individual ACA market, because what we're recognizing is a lot of folks are going onto an ACA plan, but they've got a huge deductible, and if they're taking even a drug like Eliquis, they may have to pay the full cost until they hit that deductible. So therefore, instead of paying $650 a month until you hit your, $3,000 deductible, when you can order the Eliquis from Canada for $50, you're way, way ahead of the game. I always tell the story. I do that for my wife. We have a family deductible of about $6,000. Thankfully, knock on wood, we're all pretty healthy. But my wife has allergies and has to use an inhaler a few times throughout the year during pollen season. The inhaler here in the US costs almost $700 for one inhaler. In Canada, we get the same inhaler for $117. So what we do is we never hit the deductible anyway. So what we do is we order it from Canada, 2 inhalers a year, and we're way, way ahead of the game. Now, what's important to know, though, is that if we ever do hit that deductible, God forbid somebody gets sick or gets in an accident, the drug that's being purchased from Canada is out of network, so it doesn't count towards the deductible. But Bob, I've been doing it for 6 years now, and we're way ahead of the. So we're just on those 2 inhalers alone, we're saving ourselves $1,200 a year. We're way ahead of the game. I just think it's important for clients to understand that it won't apply towards their deductible.
Yeah, I mean that's huge. I mean, to have those kind of savings, that makes a big difference. And Rob, I mean, so many of the clients are doing mail order anyway. Yep. I mean, so much of that is a 90-day supply. Everyone's used to doing the mail order. I mean, who's looking at the label where it's coming from? I mean, I don't think that even impacts it at all.
No, and you know what? I got to tell you the truth, Bob. If we were having this conversation even a few years ago, it would have been a little bit different. I always joke that when we started our company 23 years ago, the average senior wasn't walking around with a smartphone in their hand. It was a different world. You probably heard me say the story before. Back then, 20 years ago, we would ask seniors, "Hey, can you have an email so we can send you your receipt?" And they go, "Yeah, but just call me first because I have to plug it in." Remember, that was when they were like on AOL and had to plug in. It'll take me about a day to upload the, like that type of thing. That's not the senior now. The seniors are super savvy. They're on top of it. They get all of that. So it's a totally different clientele, totally different client base, and it's become a much more worldly client. They understand that. A drug coming from Canada is the exact same drug that they're getting here in the United States. The other thing that they feel comfortable about working with our team is they know they're working with a real company who's hanging their shingle in Tampa, Florida. We're not hiding from anything. They're working with a real group, so we're going to make sure they're working, with a real company.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think we'd be remiss if the topic of this last week wasn't at least mentioned here today. So, tariffs. So I'm sure when everybody thinks about anything now coming from any other country, they're thinking it's going to cost 3 times as much or whatever the case may be. Who knows? There's so much flying around there. Set the record straight for us right now on how and if and what would be the impact on anything going on to the Canadian Medstore.
Well, I got to tell you that I think our president called tariffs the word tariff the most beautiful word in the English. For me, it's just been nothing but a headache causer. I honestly think that if we would have went back just a few months ago and you asked the average person, what a tariff was, they might remember, the scene from Ferris Bueller, or they might remember something in history class way back when, but it certainly wasn't the topic of cocktail conversation. You know what I mean? Now it's like you walk in anywhere and people, hell, when we were in Vegas, people were talking about tariffs all the time and our phones ringing off the hook. I can tell you in the 23 years of doing this, we've had a bunch of questions asked, but no one's ever said, is my product going to be susceptible to a tariff? We've never had that. Now we're getting 20 calls a day asking that question. Our understanding is, and we've communicated with everybody from, Border and Customs, Commerce Department, all the way up to the White House. The president didn't take my call, but we were able to communicate with some folks, that are setting policy there. And they've been very, very clear that their intention is not to go after individuals, that are ordering a medication from Canada. So the tariff should not impact individuals. First of all, let's just say the political optics would be really, really bad if Mrs. Smith, who lives in, outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, is ordering her Eliquis from Canada, and all of a sudden now she's getting hit with a 25% tariff on her drug. It wouldn't look good. That's not the intention of it. And from what everybody in those decision-making, policy-making positions have told us is we're going after bulk shipments of things. So that means if there's a manufacturer, a European manufacturer who's shipping a massive amount of product into Canada just to get away around a tariff, we're going to go after that. But we're not going after Mrs. Smith, who's ordering her medication from Canada. So our understanding is that tariffs will not impact personal importation. Once the bureaucracy gets involved, who knows? But the guidance that we're getting is that the tariffs won't be impacted. And I can tell you the tariffs with Canada have been in effect now for going on 2 months, and we have yet to see anybody get a tariff. So my understanding is we don't fall within that process.
Beautiful.
But it is a fun ongoing conversation that I'm sure we'll be having.
Yeah, exactly. Who would have thought we talk about the Holy Smoot tariff here this year, and some of the stuff you're hearing, it's pretty crazy. We're all getting an economics lesson, I feel like, every time we turn on the TV. But
well, the best part, Bob, is now everybody your brother-in-law and the guy from the bar, they're all experts on tariffs now. Hilarious to me. A week ago they didn't know what a tariff was. Now they're explaining to you how the Canadians are screwing us on the dairy tariff, and we need to get them back. And maybe that's true. I don't know. I'm just thinking the people that are the experts. A week ago, I don't think they knew what a tariff.
Yeah, exactly. No, love that. For all the agents that are on this right now, we are going to provide at the end of the episode all the contact information, how to get in touch with the Canadian Medstore. The team here at Pinnacle is well versed on making those connections as well. We love the team over there. We've got all the contact information. Want to give it a try? I'm sure everybody's got those clients that they know have some of these prescriptions that are still just hitting them with some really high costs, and it might be worth just having a phone call like, hey, here's the situation. Can you help?
And like you said, Bob, if it's not right, then we're going to tell those folks, hey, listen, this isn't the way you want to go. We've been doing this long enough. We built our business a long time ago, knowing that if you do the right thing for the client, if you do the right thing for the agent, they're going to continue to send you referrals. And that's how we built our entire business. So if we find somebody who's taking more, if they're in that spot where we think that the 2000 is going to be the right thing, we're going to go back to the agent and say, let's talk about this before we put the people, through Canada. But the majority of the people that your agents are running into, like I said, when they're taking that, and you're going to know the drugs. Believe me, you'll share the list with the agents. As soon as they see the Eliquis, the Xarelto, the Januvia, the Genumax, those are the ones that they run into all the time, and they get a little bit of a headache because they go, oh, shoot, here's another one of those that's going to cause a problem. One thing I also want to say, too, and I don't want to take up too much time, but we talked about how an agent can utilize Canada to help somebody pick the right plan. The other thing that we keep hearing feedback from agents in the after IRA, now a few months into this, is that Medicare Advantage is a place that we've been able to help as well. Because I'll give you an example. Because of the changes to the formularies, maybe somebody was in that perfect plan for them that took all their doctors and it took their drugs. Well, now because of the formulary change, somebody might be going, well, shoot, my drug's no longer covered. Now my drug's covered at this really high tier and it's going to cost me a bunch of money. In order to get the drug covered, I have to change my Advantage plan, which means then I have to change my doctors. What a lot of savvy agents are recognizing is, no, you don't. If it's Eliquis or Xarelto or Januvia that's causing that problem, we know we can get the drug from Canada for you for, it's going to be less than what your copayment was going to be through your Advantage plan. And now you can keep your doctors, things like that. That's what the main thing people have to know. And we've hammered this to your Pinnacle team to let everybody else know. We are not a solution for Part D. We're not a replacement for Part D. We're not a replacement for an ACA plan. We're not a replacement for, a group health plan. What we are is another arrow in an agent's quiver when they run into that situation where somebody calls you and says, I just was prescribed this drug. It's expensive. It's not covered under the formulary. Boom, we can step in and help. When you're going through the planning process, let's consider Canada. Pull that one drug out and run the numbers again without Eliquis in there. When someone's in the situation of their Advantage and they don't want to change doctors, if the drug's the reason, boom, we're there to help them. If they're on a group plan and the only reason they're not leaving the group plan, even though a Medicare supplement with a Part D plan is the right thing for them, is because they're worried about their drugs being covered, bang, we can step in and help them there. That's the main thing for agents to know. We're not going to replace those products. We're there to help them sell more of those products.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're helping with a pain point, I mean, that goes a long way. I mean, you don't have to sell it, right? I'm going to save you money. It's a done deal.
Well, I mean,
it just makes sense.
Yeah, you guys are basically you're like the silent partner, and you're making the agents the hero. And, I mean, what more can you ask for?
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, well, Bill, I mean, ton of great information. I mean, I can't imagine, like you said, the agents not having this as a arrow in their quiver, just for those clients that it makes sense for. And you've got great resources at Canadian Medstore. If you're an agent and you're talking to clients that have prescription drugs, you probably want to have a conversation with us in the Canadian Medstore just to see if it makes sense for some of your clients, which I'd be surprised if it didn't, right?
You might be hearing from me. I talked to a client yesterday that was on Eliquis. So it's the first thing that came to mind.
Bill, you got to give your number to Rob here.
I need to talk
after the conversation.
Yeah. No, good, guys. Hey, and Bob, thanks so much for having me. Let's not wait another year before we do it again.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time today. And, that's going to end our episode here. Yeah. But we look forward to more conversations, and keep your eyes out. Championship Series event coming soon.
It's coming.
I imagine Canadian Medstore is going to be there.
We're there.
All right, man. Thank you again.
Thank you.